everyone, a big welcome back to the Nick Elston Show, Season 5, Episode 8, and we're flying through summer with another amazing guest to bring you. It's Tom Kegode. Big round of applause for Tom.
Woo! Too kind, Nick.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure to have you on. And again, I must give a thank you to my brother-in-law, Wayne Nutland. Not under pain of death or anything. He hasn't asked me to do that, but definitely to give him a shout out. I've recently had on the show Sarah Tate, and yourself and Sarah's names were given to me by Wayne, who said that you need to get these people on your show. They got great energy, they got great drive, they champion great things. So, of course, with a build-up like that, why am I not going to ask you on the show? So I was looking at your LinkedIn kind of overview. Bear with me on this. Future of work, culture, people, innovation, and digital disruption. Lead at Lloyds Banking Group. Engagement, keynote speaker, event host. The first question is, have you got a telly? Do you ever watch it?
Interesting. I think it's kind of like trying to put down all the things that I do, or that I sort of tried to carve this role out for myself within the organization of something of all the things that I enjoy doing, right, to make my work more enjoyable. It's always trying to fit all of those in together. But I guess I've been working for Lloyds for like 13 years now, so which is a mad amount of time, right? So like I started as a cashier back in 2009, having left like sixth form, not really knowing what I wanted to do, didn't want to go to university purely because I didn't know what I wanted to do, right? So my mate at the time was working as a cashier in a Lloyds TSB near where I grew up. So I was born in Kent, but I grew up in Devon. Okay. I was sort of working in a bar at the time, and then he was like, "Why don't you try coming and working here?" He was doing a summer stint as a cashier. Yeah. And so I did, and like 13 years later, I'm still here. But it's been really interesting, right? Because there's so many different roles. It's such a large organization. Yeah. You do lots of different things. And what I found was, because I started in that branch role as a cashier, I very quickly sort of went through the roles in the branch network. So I was a cashier for about 6 months, and I moved into an advisor role, started then advising customers on their personal lending, all that kind of stuff, and doing the personal reviews. And then I got I moved into like a sort of team leader role. So started doing a few of those roles, and then became a bank manager. And that was sort of, by that time I was sort of 21. As a bank manager, went into this role, had my own branch and team. I walk into a team at the age of 21 with a load of people that have been in there for years, and then they're like, "Who is this guy? Like, what's going on here?" And it was like
amazing journey, though.
Yeah.
And also, I know it sounds a long time, but it's really not. Actually, in the career span of things, that in a relatively short space of time, in 13 years, it's been huge kind of progress and strides forward. And I definitely want to come back to this, but I do want to kind of get to know like the Tom that maybe people don't tend to see. So tell us about little Tom. Tell us about growing up in Kent and why the move over to the Southwest and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, born in Kent, started to grow up there, and I guess we always used to holiday in Devon. And that was kind of the key for us. So we moved down to Devon when I was about 10 years old. So it was a really interesting time, right? So coming down, I'm a mixed race guy as well, coming to a sort of quite a rural part of the world. A number of challenges that would then sort of follow me as I grew up in that environment, right? But yeah, first of all, we moved down, and I was sort of 10 years old, and moved with my uncle and so whilst we were looking for a place, my mum was looking for a place to buy in the area, in the same area. So we sort of moved down there over the summer holiday. So I basically went to primary school, finished the summer holidays, and then that decision was then made over the summer holidays. I never went back to that primary school. So I ended up moving to Devon over the summer holidays and then living on a farm from being in like the southeast. Real difference. But like, because it was always a place I'd been on holiday, there's always that kind of like, oh, this is an adventure. So
and whereabouts in Devon were you based?
So we moved to a place called Ashburton, which is like between Exeter and Plymouth. So in the middle of Exeter and Plymouth. Super rural. We sort of moved to that to there. It was a farm that was just on the outskirts of that. So it was just like that sort of point was a really, exploratory time growing up, because going from being in the sort of suburban, like Kent, to being like the middle of nowhere where the sky is completely black, and you go outside and you can see the stars, and there's no sort of light pollution. And we were seeing barn owls and all these kind of things. I was like, this is just amazing. And then obviously, but then it was obviously went back to school, and that was a small, like tiny village school where there was about probably 60 kids altogether, right? In this school. And funny enough, my sister was actually back there yesterday, sending some pictures to the family WhatsApp group. She's like, taking a trip down memory lane. And I went back there a few years ago, because I moved back to Devon now as well. So I moved to London for a while, and then I moved back to Devon. And it's just amazing how small everything looks now when you go back to somewhere where you sort of remember it being so big when you were growing up. And yeah, but no, it was an interesting move. I think we had the opportunity to sort of start to then grow up in the southwest in Devon. So then we moved to our own place in Ashburton, so the small sort of market town. Grew up, went to secondary school there. And yeah, really sort of those were the kind of the formative years, right? That kind of small town. Growing up, there's probably one or two black guys in that town, which again had its own challenges, right? There was another guy that was also called Tom and was also black, and it confused the hell out of the guy, out of the fellow town people, right? So we used to get confused for each other. We both worked at Summerfield at the same time as well, which was also, their minds were blown with this. How could this be? But yeah, so that was sort of throughout the sort of 2000s.
Were you just kind of like shithousing people on like a really massive level? I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah, so we would play games with it, but also then there's that fair element of sort of small town syndrome, as I would call it, right? So faced a fair bit of racism during that time as well. And that kind of small-mindedness that comes there, and I think it's it's important to call that kind of stuff out. It's hard. I saw my mum trying to protect me and my sister as we were growing up from sort of hearing that, but as you sort of go through your life, it becomes more and more. You become more personally aware of it, but actually it's something that is going to be part of your life for once you start to experience that. And I think that now we've opened up the conversation around that, and obviously Black Lives Matter over the last few years has brought that conversation back up to the forefront again. But then it also brings up some of those memories of the time that you've had growing up. So, good times and bad.
John, it's really interesting. Do you feel that that move to an area which was less diverse actually fuels some of your passion to champion what you do now?
Yeah, I think it's, I think that's always going to be part of me, right? Because it's part of sort of my lived experience that I've had. So I think that's always going to be something that's going to be there, and that's going to sort of influence, I guess, that kind of level of tenacity and that sort of desire to want to kind of push the boundaries on things. Is something that I think is probably going to stay with me. I've also got a really tight group of friends as well that I've grown up with. So I've got lots of really great memories growing up in that environment as well. And I guess, it's, but it was interesting to then sort of go back to the city. So like, I moved to London in 2015. So I was living in Devon until I met my partner, and then I met him in Plymouth, down in Devon. So that's why I live down in Plymouth now. But we chose to move to London in 2015 and move back to the city. And that was kind of where I did realise I am a bit of a city boy at heart, right? So I did 5 years in London, and then but then also missed that kind of the rural elements as well, which is why now we've settled in Plymouth. So it's almost the best of both. So I spend a bit of time up in London, and then I spend a bit of time in Plymouth. I've got the sea. I'm a big sea swimmer, and I like to go on the moors and be outside. So it's like almost trying to find the best of all those things based on the experiences that I've had and lived through.
And thanks for sharing that, Tom. I think those insights which are valuable, because it does really align with one of the themes I was talking to Sarah about, with that people that are going into kind of mental health first aid roles or becoming champions of positive mental health, for example, very often you find in the vast majority of cases that people have had negative experiences themselves before, or people very close to them. and that's why I think it's that spark that forges people can also be the same catalyst that stops people from speaking up and also potentially destroys people. So I love what you've done with that fuel that you have for doing what you do.
And I think it's that kind of, you're right around that kind of that spark of that thing that sparks you and the things that sort of drive you, and also, but I guess it's almost sometimes those things that trigger as well, some of those those moments that will trigger, and I guess sort of I've had my own sort of mental health journey right over the last couple of years, and I guess it's kind of, that's always something that will, there's also those light bulb moments when you have that, and it's almost a realization, and you try and look at everything in your life and think of sort of try and unpack some of it, and that's how you start to sort of unpack how you get to that point, and then it's that, I think that helps you then realize who you are, right? All the things that make up who you are, and why you are the way that you are as well.
Absolutely, I absolutely agree with you, and I think we're very much aligned on that, which is cool. I actually had a flashback when you're talking about Ashburton. I lost a bet with myself on Ashburton. The bet was I couldn't drive from Bristol to Plymouth and back on half a tank of fuel, and I lost just outside of Ashburton, broke down, and had to walk into the town to get fuel. So, yeah, a little flashback from me there too of Ashburton. So thank you for sharing.
Bad memories for you then. With a jerry can walking to Pear Tree petrol station.
Yeah, we've probably crossed paths at some point. So we've mentioned, like, here and now, right now, you do lots of different kind of cool things within Lloyds. It's a role that, by and large, like you said, you've engineered to suit not just your skill set, but your passions and your loves and the things that you really want to champion. Tell us about like a typical week for you then, because obviously you're very visible. I can see from your posts, from what I hear about you from Sarah and from Wayne, that you're doing a lot of work being visible in front of camera or in front of audiences. Tell us about your usual week for you, Tom.
Yeah, so I guess sort of after I moved out of the sort of the branch sort of roles around 2015, I moved into innovation roles, and that's kind of where my heart's always been, right, in that kind of innovation. And I always had this kind of thing in my mind, right, that there's always a better way of doing things. We just haven't figured out what it is yet. So how do we start to talk about that and like open it up? So I spent a few years in there, and then the role I'm in now has been in this kind of with sort of future of work team, and I guess that kind of testing new work together in partnership, but also looking at what's going on externally. So that kind of external, playing that role externally, I feel is really important, and understand so that we're not in that kind of echo chamber, and then kind of how we have the conversations internally as well. So I think there's a couple of parts there for me which sort of tend to make up most of my weeks, right? And I think it's, so for me a typical week is generally, so and that's why I try and sort of tell that story, because most week there's no sort of real typical week, and that's such a cliche thing to say, but one week I don't like sort of giving myself, right, these 2 days I'm here, I don't like fixing it because it's so fluid. But I think there's the things that kind of make up my weeks, right? I'll probably do a couple of days from home, a few days from home, depending on what's going on. But if I've got activity that's going on, I try and build out other things around it. So, for example, if I'm having a conversation with somebody, and always, it's about hybrid working at the moment. It's about how are we working, how are others working, how can we share best practice. So, I'll typically do a couple of days from home a week, and then if I've got something going on, so I might be chatting with somebody, I might have like that one thing that's in my week that is sort of a face-to-face interaction, and then I'll start building activity around it. So I'll look at how can I make the time that I go into an office really meaningful, right? So if I've got a meeting with somebody, say, to record a podcast, which I did a couple of weeks ago in central London, I'll be like, right, what else can I do when I'm there to make the most of that time being face-to-face? So I'm a lot more intentional when I go into use offices and when I go when I'm traveling. So I think if I've got one thing, let me build out and plan activity around that to make it really worthwhile and focus on that kind of face-to-face interaction time. So like that typical week might look like I work from home on Monday, perhaps also on Tuesday, and then Wednesday morning I'll travel in super early on the train. I'll do a load of work on the train whilst I'm there, so I can get all my emails out of the way, and then I put an out of office on, right? So my in the office message goes on to say I'm going to be in the office. You'll see a delayed virtual response to me because I'm making the most of face-to-face time now. I'm actually making the most of meeting people in person. And then I can that's the freedom to like ditch your emails and just spend time catching up with people. Because over the last couple of years, there's been sort of that's the thing we've missed the most, right? And I get my energy from people, so it's like
that
I need
community
to have
element.
that recharge. Yeah,
absolutely. And do you feel that mindset shift has been sharpened over the past couple of years, that it's far more intentional now to make the most of our time? Because I guess that the commonality is that that's the one thing that we've all kind of regretted, really, the waste of time for lots of different reasons.
Definitely. And I think it's that kind of it's still a journey, right, of that kind of intentionality. And I think the problem that we've got is it's very easy to default to old work thinking and old work practices. We need to be, and that's why I'm really vocal in sharing my day, my week, right, to try and say, look, this is how it could look like. There's so many, it's a real opportunity where we're at now to start to shape what this new work looks like together. And I think it's people just need to have that freedom to test and learn, right? And it's something that we talk about a lot, is this kind of test and learn. It's okay to fail, but I think if we go back, we need to go back differently, right? Over the last 2 years, we've seen the level of innovation take place and acceleration of things that we thought were never possible of about 5, right? So about 5 years ahead of where we thought we would have been if there wasn't a pandemic. It's easy to innovate when you've got a pandemic chasing you and there's a crisis behind you, right? So it's easy to think, right, how do we make decisions quicker? How do we start to think around solving these problems? Because there's a sense of urgency. The challenge is when we're emerging from a sense of crisis, how do we can maintain that sense of pace and that sense of urgency? And I think that's the challenge. And what we're seeing at the moment, and the thing, the period we're at the moment is that we perhaps starting to see some sort of trying to like sort of step back or revert back or go back, like think that things are going back to normal, so wind it back, which is kind of wasteful, really. Like we end up wasting all that progress that's been made, and
I think
only delaying what's going to come ahead.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think if you kind of fall back into that playing the old reality by the new rules, it just won't work, or won't work effectively in that sense, because of, like you said, the innovation that's taken place, both personally and professionally. Also, it's to do with our kind of personal time and personal lives as well, isn't it? But one thing that really resonated with something that you said then, Tom, it was something that you kind of mentioned in the passing, but for me, it's actually quite a crucial thing I want to pick up on, is breaking out of the echo chamber. I think the way that I personally choose to learn, and that's through reading or watching or listening or podcasts, or whatever that may be, is to listen and watch people that are very different to me, and have different views, different opinions, different insights. And that's kind of how we learn, isn't it? Because if we only listen and talk to people like us, we just never kind of break out of that. This podcast actually was kind of created to do that, is to ask questions of people that are in different experiences, walks of life, ways of life than me. Our last guest we had on last week, an amazing person, Charlotte Phillips-Lynn, was talking about kind of the importance of pronouns and being non-binary and things that I just didn't understand. And I think there's this real fear around asking questions of people. But for me, the option is you either ask questions or you get very defensive about things because it's different. And I love to ask questions about things. So when you put yourself out there talking about the things that you do, championing the things that you do, you still very much work in one of the last bastions of traditional business in terms of banking and finance. Do you ever experience any pushback or negativity or even toxicity?
I think it's definitely it can be a challenge. I think from an external perspective, I think people find it quite refreshing, because I'll walk into a place, people say, "You don't look like a typical banker," and I'm like, "Yeah, no." Like typically, I walk into a place with a pair of box fresh trainers on and a baseball cap, right? And people are like, "You work for Lloyds." High five. Exactly, right? And that's purely because I've got this thing where I'm like, I don't understand how people feel it's the one thing that you can still be discriminated against, is the way that you choose to represent yourself and what you wear and your clothes. I find it odd as that's the thing. So I always try and be provocative, right, as well. So where always previously we used to have we didn't have a dress code at the organisation. Now it's typically dress for your day, work dress for what you feel is appropriate, right? But there was always these kind of traditions where you go into one of the head office buildings and you got to dress up, you got to wear a tie, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. I've binned all my time. I did my stint doing that when I was working in the branch network, right? I had to wear a tie every day and a waistcoat, and I'm like, I'm not. When I moved to the role in a digital, I was like, I'm not doing that anymore. So, and I think it's still an ability for, as I think some people still find that a challenge, right? Because the people like that level of tradition. So
I think you're right.
Yeah.
And I think obviously for us and the way that we are, my screen's gone really dark for some reason. I always kind of use this. I never edit stuff. Oh, there we go. I'm back. I never edit, so I'll keep this in because it's just funny. But I just couldn't see me for a while. Anyway, it's probably a blessing in disguise. I think you're quite right. I think it's very hard for us to deliver authenticity if we're not dressed authentically. Because it's kind of by default you're going in with a mask, aren't you? In that sense, and I love that, and I love the fact that you're doing it, and like you said, in a space which traditionally hasn't been the reserve of being able to be that free. We've also spoken to a couple of guests over the seasons around things like tattoos and things that are kind of cosmetic in that sense that can be easily judged by. And I like the fact that bit's being broken down for sure. Yeah,
I think that's it, and it's kind of try and get as many. I think it's what makes you authentic, right? It's the kind of that's what makes me. So and you know that's fine, but some people that authenticity or that fit and makes them feel like they can be more themselves. If they want to go into that environment wearing a suit, then that's cool, right? But we should never sort of like make judgments based on that, or like think about people's intelligence based on that, which I think is what's potentially happened in the past. I think for me and me as well, like so I like to be able to sort of almost up front give people the kind of the information about me as well, that where I've come from, like my background, like I've worked in the branch network. That's where I started from the bottom. I've had that customer experience. I'm a black gay man that lives in Plymouth, right? But people would think, perhaps you're living in a city, or do you know what I mean? Or you're living in London, and it's like, and I've had sort of challenges at work. I've had sort of mental health issues. I was over sort of 2020. I was off for 8 months, whilst there's quite a significant period in my life, which is when I realized that I had these kind of mental health issues and challenges. But I'll talk about that, right? And I'll talk about what was the sort of journey to get there. Some of that was to do with work, some of that was to do with what was going on externally, and those things combining. And actually, I think that's super important to get that out there in the conversation, to say, look, this is me. This is perhaps why I think in this way. And these are all the component parts that, like, what I'm drawing on from that experience to sort of make that up. And
like you said, you're setting that kind of context with people that I think if you deliver any message to anybody, that to set the context is really important, isn't it? Why are you there? Giving them what you're giving them, and for them to buy into you, they need to feel what you say, not just hear what you say. They to feel what you say, and I think that's really important. Thank you for sharing so candidly about your own experiences as well. Like you said, if you are happy to talk about that, how did that kind of manifest itself in terms of your mental health and the kind of support that you had around that?
So I guess it was a compounded time of two things. So I was at the time I was in three things if you class a global pandemic as well, right?
Of course.
So it was at the beginning of right at the very beginning, just before the pandemic, and I was working in a team. The team had a number of sort of cultural issues in that team that I was in at the time, and I was speaking up about that. So that was something that was going on at the same time. And then at the same time, so the big external thing that happened in my life. So one of my best mates passed away just before the pandemic. So, and it was one of those kind of those situations where this was like one of my best mates from school got trapped in addiction. And that was kind of just as the pandemic was starting, he went into intensive care. So a number of those things are sort of starting to build, and I guess it's that kind of at the same time you've got a lockdown coming in, you've got all these various things happening, and I guess that was the kind of sort of the build up to a number of sort of things that sort of whilst what was going on in the workplace as well was there, and then he passed away just before lockdown came in. So then it's like, we weren't able to say goodbye properly. We weren't able to do all the kind of usual stuff you would have done. So, and then obviously that's kind of, which we're going through that, and like that close group of friends that we had. So we're doing a lot of that stuff virtually, and we're speaking virtually, but it's during the backdrop of all the other stuff that's going on externally as well. And then obviously the kind of challenging times within the workplace. So I was just like, I took to the point where it was like, right, I need to just take some time out and figure out sort of that. I guess I just kind of almost felt something in my head just go pop. and I was like, right, I need to just stop, because all these things going on, I need to be able to sort of organize those and just figure out where I am. And that was when I sort of started to go through sort of talking therapy, did some of that. And then I sort of moved on to sort of taking sertraline as well. So I've been using that as and that's been really helping. So yeah, but it was that period of time that I had to take off. So I was like, I need to take this time off. I'm not sure how long it's going to be. Against the backdrop of what was going on at work, and sort of I was working through a sort of a process there where I was advised by the sort of my unions, representatives, to stay away from this situation that was going on there. So it's that kind of compounded two things that were going on, and then fortunately during that period of time, whilst I was off, and that sort of process was going on in the background around grievances and challenging the kind of situation that was going on there. I was actively looking for another role within the organisation, and then I found the role that I'm in currently, which is an awesome team, right? So then I came back 8 months later, ready and sort of in a team that was a supportive team. I've got the best line manager, and sort of the wider team is a great team, which is aligned to the sort of the thinking that I've got.
So are you truly being heard in life and in business? And think about that genuinely. If the answer to that is no, then you've found the right event. If you want to give yourself that boost personally and professionally, come along to Find Your Voice Live. This will change your life. This will be the game changer that you've been looking for.
It provides me with the confidence in myself to prove to myself that I can do it, I can get up on stage, I can speak.
There's absolutely nothing to be nervous about with these events. It's very, very open, very, very relaxed.
Help my confidence go from here at the beginning of the day to here at the end of the day.
Hey everyone, my name is Nick Elston. I'm an inspirational speaker on the lived experience of mental health and a transformational speaking coach. I'm the founder of Forging People, and Find Your Voice Live is our flagship event where we cross the boundaries of personal development, mental health, transformation and public speaking. Your ability to speak, to deliver any message to any audience with clarity and power and emotion will have an ultimately defining impact on your success by your own definition of that really subjective term. Speaking is life, speaking is business, speaking is education, and that's the thing that we focus on most. What I find is that people are here for many, many different reasons. Some people do absolutely want to be a stage speaker or a professional speaker. Some people want to be able to represent their business or to lead a team or inspire a movement or create a story. But even actually, some people want to be here just because they want to be heard at home. Maybe they don't feel their opinions being heard, that they can't say yes to the things they want to say yes to or no to the things they want to say no to. Again, this is where personal development meets mental health, meets public speaking to create a real positive impact. At the end of Find Your Voice Live, you will walk away with massive confidence around delivering your message. The ability to stand up and deliver means you will enhance your self-esteem in an amazing way. You will also have the skills and tools and tips and techniques to not only deliver a presentation, but to structure a presentation, to find your audience, to be able to deliver emotional storytelling to help your audience feel and make them want to be part of your tribe, make them want to be part of your following, and really tune into what you're truly about, to truly make yourself heard in life and in business. If you're sat on the fence, if you're still not sure, take the model that I use, say yes, worry about it later, and I'll make sure that you're looked after brilliantly. Myself and my team will make sure that you have an amazing day, transformational day that will have the desired positive impact that you want to achieve.
But it took a while to go through that process.
Absolutely.
To kind of, when you got all of those things that are at play, and then I guess it's that kind of latest kind of ongoing challenge. So I'm currently working through trying to sort of get a finalised ADHD diagnosis. So my GP has made a sort of, which then makes a lot of things very clear, right? That's sort of why I'm so super active, why it's been really hard for me to focus on reading over the years. I can't, difficult to retain certain information. I've got a fidget spinner in my hand right now, right? So it's like I've always got something that, and I'm always pacing and moving around. So it's like, and the GP was like, actually, yeah, that sounds like this could be a bit of you, right? So obviously going through that process, which is quite a longer process as well. So it's almost trying to. But only I don't think I would have got to that point if I hadn't gone through these things and gone through this understanding of myself and actually what my own what goes on in my own head. I think that would have, unless I'd have gone through this journey, I wouldn't have been able to then have that opportunity to step back and look at what are the things that make me, right? Yeah, absolutely. And then how can I use some of those things as well, and they use those experiences to then actually do some good next, right? And how can I use this? I think be a bit of a role model if I can.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. Thank you for sharing with such candor and clarity. I appreciate that, and I think it also has to be said, you have an amazing amount of self-awareness, which actually probably saved you in that sense, because not everybody would have taken that step back when you needed to. And well, I know from personal experience, having not made that decision, it's really difficult to do that. And obviously that's when you get into the realms of things like burnout and breakdown and lots of different things that can come on the back of that. So like literally, I doff my cap to you for doing that. That's an amazing thing. How did you find the kind of the coming back in, that kind of re-entry into the organization, especially given the fact that potentially there were kind of tainted relationships within other groups and stuff, and somebody that travels around your organization? Is there any kind of fear there anymore, or is it now just something that's done for you?
No, so I had to sort of put that to one side, right? And I think it's almost I would have found it very difficult going back into that environment. And I think that's something I just wouldn't have done. And that was kind of the conversations that I was having with multiple people at that time. So to actually then find somewhere where you can go in and feel appreciated for the value that you bring was a real thing for me. And actually having that opportunity to be in the team I'm in now gave me that. So that kind of clean break was a thing that was a really important one. But also then I'm able to work and move into an environment and a team where actually my expertise that I built up, which is around work culture, people innovation, was valued, and actually was something that people felt was a critical for that period of time that we were in, right? So I think that made a massive difference, having that clean break. If not, who knows if I would be still with the organisation. But I think it's testament to that, and I think there's a number of people that were sort of part of that situation a little bit with the organisation, so that's that's helped with that kind of process. But yeah, it's always going to be. It's a difficult one to move on from when you've had that kind of experience. It is. And you stay within the same organisation because you're like, okay, this leaves a bit of a taste in the mouth, right, of that kind of experience when you have that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think other people restore your trust if you have the right people around you, because organisations now, the size and the scale. There's 58,000. There's going to be sort of a representative of of the world, right, and of the people that you're serving, right. There's going to be different views, different opinions. There's going to be bad apples, right. There's going to be a mixture of people. So it's just finding and surrounding yourself with the right people that appreciate you and value you for what you bring. I think that makes a massive difference. It makes a difference in your confidence. It makes a difference in your belief in yourself, where actually you can go from a point. That change and that dynamic change can make such a difference in terms of the belief that is sort of put into you, or you believe because of what people, because of the way that you're treated by certain people. That can change in terms of your belief of what you're able to then do and deliver and achieve after that. So. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think it's interesting for people that are not part of a large organisation. It's very easy to lose sight of just how big, not an organisation, but Lloyds Banking Group actually is huge. I mean, I've worked with them for 7 years in different capacities through speaking and stuff. And every time I met a new person, I say to my brother-in-law, say to Wayne, "Oh, do you know this person?" He said, "Nick, there's tens of thousands of people that work here. I don't know everybody that works here." And I think for me, not being part of a large organisation, there's that assumption of you're going to know everybody. So like you said, you can choose that environment that you surround yourself with. And I think that's important.
Yeah. And I think what else it does from it. So having gone through that experience, it also gives you a certain set. Well, for me, it's given me a certain a certain element of I don't give a shit, right? I will go and speak to people now. I don't care. I don't care for certain things, right? I don't care for seniority because I just find it baffling. These people eat and drink the same way that we do, so I'll go and have a chat with anybody. I don't care. I trust my integrity to do the right thing because I feel sometimes you can't necessarily trust everybody that you're around, but when you're with a good group of people, that's good. But I know I've got, what is my sort of moral compass? When should I be speaking out? I've had that tested. So I've been able to sort of do that. And I know that I trust that in myself. I trust myself to be able to do those things, which means that I trust myself to be really bold in some of the things that I will challenge back on, and some of the things that I will sort of position, and actually try and be more pioneering when the way we talk and the way that we act. Because I think, what's the point? Life's too short for that, right? You got to if you want to make a difference, you're going to have to be bold. And I think that's the important one, which is how I try and live my life now. And I've actually got a motto, right, which is on here. It's on my board. It says, "Move fast and do the right thing." So I think so many times, right, you can end up you're stuck in a corporate machine, and it takes so long to get things done. You've got to go through all these processes. I think, right, is this the right thing to do? Yes. Okay. Is it safe? Right? Are we putting ourselves at any risk? No. Okay, let's do it. Let's not get ourselves caught up in the kind of bureaucracy that comes with being in any large organization. Let's find ways to do things on a small scale, test them, prove their value, and then make it happen. So move fast, do the right thing. And I think that's when you start to see true innovation take place, but also you learn from the failures, the things that don't go right. And it's also how we normalize that as well, because I think it's so easy to class failure as a bad thing. But actually it's the biggest opportunity for learning you can get, and you won't have proper innovation without failure. So it's trying to remove that fear of failure. And I think a big one that needs to be more normalized is senior leaders and executives talking about their mistakes openly, because then that creates that environment of psychological safety that says it's okay to fail around here. It's okay to make a mistake, and this is what I learned from it. Because otherwise, people will make a mistake in secret, not share the outcome of that, and then that mistake just keeps getting made by people because nobody knows that this is how I overcome it, and this is what I learned, this is what I'll do differently. So it's doing a disservice to the whole organisation by not being open about failure and mistakes.
I love that. I think it's a really great mantra to go by, genuinely. There's this word that keeps coming through with you, and it's not just from what you've said, it's not just from what I've been told, but also looking at things like your testimonials on LinkedIn and the things that people say about you, this energy. And you give a lot of energy. And we've kind of gone into some of the reasons why that could be, but genuinely that you deliver with energy, you have an energy for what you do. But I also appreciate that with high energy, it needs a lot of recharging in the background. What do you do to recharge your batteries when you need to? So I'm a big sea swimmer. Right, so I love swimming in the sea. Just something about, I find it quite meditative, right? Just like I'll try, and now my new thing is just floating. I'll go in the sea. I was in the sea yesterday. I'll be going in there today. The benefits of living in Plymouth, and when I'm on a home day and I'm not in London or in Bristol or wherever, I always try and get in the water, because I can get from this desk to the sea in 8 minutes. Nice.
In the car, so I'm there, and then I'm straight in, and then maybe even a little ice cream afterwards. But nice. But yeah, but that's it for me. It's kind of that kind of, you can get in the ocean and you're like, the sea is bigger than you, right? And there's that one thing where it's like you can just stand there and you think, actually, everything else is small in comparison. This is, and then that's why. So I do that. Obviously, music's a big one for me, so I DJ as well.
Tell us about that. Actually, so tell us about your DJing. I was really excited to learn that. I didn't know that about you until we started the recording.
Yeah, so I did a bit of so I've always sort of tried to DJ, right? So I always sort of tried, as I was growing up. I had sort of vinyl decks. I grew up, and I've always sort of loved the idea of being a DJ. So I'd always tried and failed. And then I started to sort of kept persevering at it, right? And then eventually I started to get all right. And I started to sort of doing mixes, and over sort of the lockdowns, I started to do mixes of, like, on Fridays, just doing live streams. People were doing that. And like floor fillers and just typical going back to sort of garage stuff. And I've really started to sort of, and then when I moved back to Plymouth, I got involved in a sort of local radio station. So I did a radio show, Afrobeats. So I'm half Kenyan as well. So Kenyan is a big part of my culture. You see the flag behind me, and it's on my wrist, and on my other wrist, you've got the Kenyan colours on my Apple Watch strap. So that's a big part of my life. So Afrobeats was the kind of where I started there. And then I guess I was doing a regular weekly show on a Friday evening, doing that. then I started getting more and more into sort of the disco house vibe. So and what I've found since I moved to Plymouth, there's a thriving community here, right, of young DJs, all focused on sort of good vibes and like that kind of fun, friendly community, which is really great. So it's great to be sort of part of that community. They put on events around. But typically and then I do a few bits and pieces. So I'm DJing. I do a DJ sort of event for friends, I guess, mostly.
Okay.
So I did a wedding I've got a wedding this weekend that I'm doing, and then I did another party a couple of weeks ago. But I'm trying not to do too much of that.
Yeah.
Because I like to keep it as something for me that I do to relax. I like to go to events, but it's not a chore. It's not a job. I don't want to try and monetize it too much. I want to play the music I want to play as well. So I use this opportunity to switch off. So I've got literally my desk here. I switch over to the right, and then I've got my DJ kit is all set up over there. So that's kind of the balance for me. So I love going to events here. I love being part of the community and the guys that do great stuff down in Plymouth, which is, it's great to have that as an opportunity to release and go out. So I guess it's kind of just a bit of another sort of way of unwinding, really, for me. I
love
find
that.
it. So I can get into that state where actually I'm focused on the music. Yeah. And that gives me that kind of other release. So sea swimming, DJing, and that's it.
Because there is that really real risk, I guess, when you deal with energy, especially emotional energy, which is fueled by previous experiences and stuff. There's a real risk that you deliver from you as opposed to through you. So you'll give until you drop. And then that's kind of, so it is important to know what recharges us, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, and it's so easy, and that's probably something, maybe that's to do with my personality again, and this is, I guess, some of them when you start to read more around these kind of ADHD traits as well, like you've got to zone in and hyper focus on certain things, and then I'm like, right, I've got to do this, like I've got to do Friday floor first. Every Friday I've got to do a live stream, which is what I was doing back in the lockdowns, right? And it's like, why? Like, do I need to do that, really? Like, there's a few people are watching it, but but then I think, like, so I'm trying to find ways of sort of slowing that down and thinking, because then it becomes less of a release and more of a task. Yeah. So it's how do you stop that from happening, and so that it's something that is there for you rather than something that is there that you then is built into a sort of a job that you have to do. And that kind of concept of monetizing your hobby as well is that kind of bit where I'm trying to not do that too much because I just want to keep them separate.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking ahead, what's next for Tom Kegode?
Who knows? I'm at an interesting point now. So I think I'm working in a team that I really enjoy, right? But I'm also thinking it may be time for a change. So and whether that change is inside the organisation or outside the organisation, I don't know yet. But there's a lot of a journey that going on, sort of a journey over the last sort of few years, a number of years with the organisation. And Lloyds is a great place, and there's a lot of change going on in there, so there could be opportunities there. But I'm definitely ready to move into another role soon, and I think it's kind of what that looks like. I'm not sure, but I'm excited for it. Right? I
Absolutely, you should be.
It's that time of thinking about what's next, and I think it's having that. You've got to be in a good position to think about that. I think, and almost like have that all the stuff that's built up to make you. Yeah, there's then almost your, what is it that I want to do? So it's almost like I'm ready to start exploring what that might be, but I haven't got anything. I've got no urgency to do that, right? Because I'm in a great team. Yeah. So it's almost like you've got the best of both because you're in a great team, you're doing stuff that you love, but also I'm open to anything. So it's it's having that ability to be ready to go at any time, but I'm just excited to explore what's next, particularly when we talk about like the world of work. I think we're going through this sort of period of time of change, and as we start to shape this new work, it's going to be another interesting period as we start to sort of the pandemic starts to recede, and we start to look at what does this sort of next phase of the evolution of work look like. So,
and it is exciting. I mean, there is this association with change. That change is always negative, but it's neutral. That's it. It could be good. It could be bad, and it's.
I mean, I love it. I love change. I love ambiguity. It gives me vibes, right? I really just I thrive on it. Like when there's that kind of thing going on, that people were like, "Oh, well, I don't like change." I'm like, I love it. Literally, maybe that's why I've worked in innovation for the last 5 years. But yeah,
beauty from the chaos. Is that right, Tom?
That's it. Something like that, right? And I think it's always the opportunity to keep changing and working on different things for me.
Brilliant.
It's exciting.
So the question I love to ask everybody that comes on the show, and it forms part of the playlist that happens at the end of the season, is this. I'm now going to set the scene. I'm now the MC of the O2 Arena in London. 20,000 people have paid their hard-earned money to come and hear you do your thing. You're sat back in the green room sipping a Prosecco, a beer, a tipple of your choice, and you hear me call your name and your walk-on music kicks in. That song that motivates you, that lifts you, that gets you at peak state. I've always wanted to ask a DJ this. What would your walk-on music be and why?
So this is a really hard one, and I was trying to think about this kind of. I was trying to think about this because there's just so many. But I think for me, what the tune that would be my walk-on music is probably "All the Stars" by Kendrick Lamar. So that's
a great addition to the playlist.
Yeah, and it's it's that kind of when a lot of the stuff that was happening in my own sort of mental health journey was going on, right? It was the same time as Black Lives Matter, at the same time that Chadwick Boseman passed away, and that was the kind of there's all those things that came together was sort of helped me sort of realize that I needed to do something differently and I needed to find another way. So that was that kind of pivotal moment, but also it's kind of the links that's got with Black Panther and that kind of sort of that rising and actually sort of finding that strength in yourself for me. So yeah, that would be my walk-on music for sure.
Brilliant. Love that, Tom. Thank you so much for donating your busy time to be here on the show and chat to us all today. I know my audience will have enjoyed this as much as I have. So big round of applause from me to you.
Thanks, Nick. No, it's great. It's been great to catch up. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. Really enjoyed today's show. Thank you. Thank you again for sharing with such clarity and candor. Really enjoyed the conversation. And for everybody else, please do reach out. I'm sure Tom will be happy to connect and hear from you and stuff. Please do connect with Tom. Great person to know. And hopefully this will be the first of many times that our worlds collide as well. So stay tuned, hit follow, subscribe and like and all that jazz, whatever it's going to take to get you back here next Monday, because we have another amazing guest to bring you in the shape of Gogglebox star Basit Siddiqui, him off the telly. He will be here on the show talking next week. So stay tuned. But in the meantime, take care, be well, stay happy. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye. Bye.